Welcome back, Summoners! It's me, it's my face, hello. My name is Tia, and today we have our high ELO tier list for patch 2.2b. This tier list covers play Emerald and higher and assumes strong mastery of the mentioned champion mechanics. For a more beginner-friendly tier list, check out our previous tier list released earlier this week. Without much further ado, let's just dive right into it. Starting with the Baron lane, we have Akali in the overpowered tier. She's been an absolute menace in high ELO for quite some time now, with invisibility, burst damage, and mobility all built into her kit. During the laning phase, she utilizes her 5-point strike to poke down her enemies, abusing her Twilight Shroud to create a mist of invisibility, instantly vanishing into thin air. Since the speed at which she disappears is so quick, Akali is perfectly capable of somersaulting around her lane opponent while kiting them down. Once her target's health falls low, Akali's ultimate, Perfect Execution, is quite literally the perfect execution skill to finish her enemies, granting her 2 dashes to both close in the gap and escape dangerous skirmishes. If you want to main a ninja assassin, Akali is the best option for you. Sorry, Zed. Before we move on, question of the day time. If you were to cosplay as a Wild Rift champion, who would you cosplay as? I would like to be Akali because not only is she a cool champion that can assassinate people, hiya, but she just looks cool and I want to be a ninja. So that's what I think, but I want to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments down below. The next pick for today is Camille in the S tier for the Baron lane. She's incredibly mobile, capable of bypassing many of the thinner terrain in Wild Rift using her hookshot. This skill throws Camille onto a wall, allowing players to navigate Camille's jump thereafter. When utilized properly, this skill provides fantastic utility in maneuvering the map. Hitting an enemy champion with this skill knocks them up. Follow up her engage with her ultimate Hextech Ultimatum. This skill is one of the greatest isolation skills in the game, creating a cage that her target cannot escape. Understanding each aspect of Camille's kit is key to maximizing her potential, since her high damage and fast mobility can absolutely decimate the enemy team. But Camille's skills are definitely not the most conventional, making her a very rewarding champion to learn while providing a very high skill ceiling. Singed is the last Baron pick for the day, sitting at the C tier. He's been underperforming since he doesn't really provide anything solid for his team. Singed's playstyle relies on running around while confusing the enemy team, creating slows with Mega Adhesive and a stream of DPS with Poison Trail. The issue with this playstyle is that it's difficult not only for his enemies to understand his objective priority, but it's also difficult for his own team. Without the conventional engage, AoE lockdown, or burst damage that most Baron laners provide, coordinating with a Singed player, unless you're on comms, can be unnecessarily ambiguous. Without proper team coordination to follow up on his plays, Singed is incredibly vulnerable to being locked down by crowd control, making the pick very weak. And hey, if you're looking for more players like yourself to get on comms with, join our community Wild Rift Discord so we can all play together. Yay! Here is the full Baron tier list. In the jungle, we have Evelynn up first, once again in the overpowered tier. Patch 2.2b nerfed her ultimate ability by a couple of seconds, not touching any of the actual mechanics that made her overpowered. In essence, there are still no vision wards to counter the invisibility, meaning she's still capable of finding unique angles for a guaranteed pick. Since her second ability, Allure, charms the enemy when properly timed, during this oppressive CC, the target enemy is just a sitting duck. None of her damage numbers were changed, so if she wants to 100 to 0 you before you can even move, she's gonna do it. A simple ultimate cooldown nerf does little to nothing to change her actual kit and damage. Honestly, this reminds me of the tiny nerfs they applied to Lulu and Orianna a couple of patches ago when they were considered overpowered. But in both of these cases, Riot followed up with more nerfs in future patches, so I believe they'll probably do the same for Evelynn. In addition, the release of Rengar and Kha'Zix should add more competition for Evelynn in the jungle. Our analysts have speculated that the 2 new junglers will be in the overpowered or S tier picks for high ELO, since they both have the capability of jumping and bursting down squishy champions. Assassin burst damage carries that rely on invisibility are incredibly oppressive to play against, from the examples of Evelynn and Akali. These 2 picks also rely on invisibility, and although they do not remain invisible as long as Evelynn, their release signifies a shift in the meta of Wild Rift. Rengar and Kha'Zix fit perfectly into this category of champions, but build AD instead. Depending on their exact damage numbers and scaling in Wild Rift, the hunting rivals definitely have the potential to absolutely take over the game. And even if they release in a weak state, knowing Riot's love for newly released champions, they'll without a doubt be buffed until they become at least meta. If you're looking for more OP exploits, be sure to check out our OP item builds for every role. The last jungle pickup is Lee Sin, who is still being played very often in the high ELO. Placed in our S tier this list, high ELO Lee Sin players have become more and more adept at controlling the map objectives thanks to his high mobility from his Safeguard and Resonating Strike. Since the Blind Monk is strongest in the early game, he is perfectly capable of granting an early lead for his team, snowballing the game in his favor. And I'm sure most of you guys know, an early lead in Wild Rift pretty much determines the game. Not because the enemy team can't come back, but chances are if they're playing from behind, they'll already be spamming surrender votes and creating conflicts among themselves. Here's the full jungle tier list. The first champion up for the mid lane is Ziggs in the overpowered tier. The nerfs in patch 2.2b barely touched him, only slightly increasing his cooldown for his first ability, Bouncing Bomb, during the early game. He can still push lanes incredibly fast and deal massive amounts of damage from afar with his ultimate Mega Inferno Bomb. He's a very safe champion, abusing his long range and wave clear to steamroll the enemy team. Thanks to Satchel Charge, Ziggs has the unique ability to execute towers without auto-attacking them. This is a massive advantage to have in Wild Rift, creating gaps and opportunities for his team to gain control of the map. The skill comes particularly handy when executing inhibitor towers, since this grants permanent super minions in the specific wave, asserting constant pressure on the enemy team. The next champion up is Diana in the S tier. Since she received buffs a couple patches ago, she's been a very strong pick in the high ELO. Her biggest weakness, the early laning phase, became less of an issue since her passive Moonsilver Blade now grants enhanced auto attack speed, increasing her wave clear and combo potential. This buff is actually huge, since she can now weave in auto attacks to stack up more damage in the middle of a trade. If Diana manages to come out at least even in the laning phase, she really ramps up, excelling in teamfights thanks to her incredible mobility and burst potential. Her ultimate, Moonfall, absolutely decimates clumped up enemies, knocking them up while dealing extraordinary damage. But she's definitely not easy to play, since she relies on all-in engages to hit her key skills. The last mid lane champion for today is Galio, standing very proudly in the S tier. He's one of the most stable picks in Wild Rift, thanks to his ability to impact the entire map. The Colossus's ultimate heroic entrance allows him to fly to his allies' aid, dropping down while knocking up nearby enemies. His third ability, Justice Punch, flings him a sizable distance, knocking up the first enemy he hits, while his second ability, Shield of Durand, grants him an area of effect taunt. This totals up to 3 total crowd control abilities, and considering he typically builds full AP, Galio's kit is a little busted. Galio's roams are not to be taken lightly, so be wary of the Gargoyle's presence in the Wild Rift. Here are all the mid champions ranked. Xayah is further cemented in the overpowered picks for the high elo thanks to her recent buffs in patch 2.2b. She excels at poking down her enemies with the smart use of her extended feathers provided by her passive Clean Cuts. By positioning effectively, the Rebel shreds through and roots her enemies by recalling her feathers by utilizing her third skill, Blade Caller. Since this root duration recently increased in patch 2.2b, mastery of Xayah is highly rewarded. She's the perfect ADC to extend the duration of crowd control, maximizing team coordination. One of the greatest tools in Xayah's kit is her ultimate Featherstorm, which throws Xayah in the air while granting her invulnerability. Comboed with Guardian Angel and potentially Azonia's, bursting down Xayah is a very risky operation. Another champion with a great safety net is Ezreal in the S tier for this list. He's sure to see more and more play thanks to the utility from his third ability, Arcane Shift. This allows him to pretty much have a second flash, teleporting him a short distance away while dealing damage to the nearest target. Especially since Ezreal heavily relies on skill shots to deal the main bulk of his damage, he's one of the greatest marksmen for finding safe positioning and getting out of sticky situations. With champions like Rengar and Kha'Zix soon to terrorize the Wild Rift, an escape option for AD carries will become very essential. The third ADC for today is Tristana, now in the A tier. The Yordle Gunner got buffed 3 times in a row and is finally in a solid position for high levels of play. Her kit relies on burst damage in order to acquire takedowns and get those signature frog jumping resets on her second ability, Rocket Jump. The base damage buffs on Explosive Charge and Buster Shot help her tremendously, rounding out and finally making her kit viable. For those of you who have really been wanting to play Tristana but couldn't justify the pick because of her overall weaknesses, your chance has finally come. Here are all the ADC picks. Last but not least, we have my favorite role, the support role, yay! With Leona up first. She's in the S tier, very nearly in the overpowered picks. Having received 2 consecutive buffs to an already powerful crowd control kit, the Targonian champion has an oppressive, powerful lockdown and survivability. Zenith Blade, her third ability, is a fantastic tool to close the gap between her targets. Simply follow up with her 2 additional crowd control skills, Shield of Daybreak and Solar Flare, to keep the enemy stationary until death. If you ever find yourself playing support in a team composition lacking a frontline tank, you'll never go wrong with locking in Leona. Next up is Seraphine in the A tier. Thanks to the nerfs to Alistar, she's becoming more and more prevalent in the high elo, capable of becoming a lane bully that scales well into the mid to late stages of the game. Her strength lies largely in her ultimate ability, Encore. Debatably one of the greatest support ultimates in the game, Encore throws out a very long area of effect charm. When properly utilized, this is one of those crowd control skills that can completely change the tides of a game, rewarding proper usage by extending further with the more units it passes through. Comboed with her heals and snares from the empowered usage of other abilities, Seraphine is a solid support pick in patch 2.2b. But keep in mind, she's very fragile, leaving her vulnerable to heavy engage and crowd control. The final pickup is Soraka in the C tier. She's honestly in a terrible position, especially in light of the increased price of both Ardent Sensor and Harmonic Echo. With a body as weak as glass, she has no counter options to champions like Leona and Braum. The Unicorn heals others by sacrificing her own health, a very unfavorable trade considering she lacks the base stats to survive practically any engage. She's not particularly strong in the laning phase, meaning she's not a good pick to realistically counter any champion. Literally all the other enchanter supports are just better, so use them instead. Sorry, Soraka. Here are all of the support picks. Once again, keep in mind this particular tier list is for the high elo, making the assumption that players have a strong understanding of the mentioned picks. We have a separate tier list for average level of play. But that concludes today's video. If you enjoyed the content, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Don't forget to address the question of the day in the comments down below. I really do read them. Join our Wild Rift Discord, and until next time, stay safe and have fun, and come and say hi to me in the ether of the internet video game world. Okay, I'm gonna leave now. Goodbye.